It has been my custom, in setting down the singular adventures of my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes, to select those cases which best illustrate the peculiar quality of his reasoning. Yet there are certain records I have long hesitated to publish, not for want of interest, but because they touched too nearly upon the private griefs of families still living, or because the truth they revealed was of a kind that men would rather not believe possible in their fellow creatures. The affair which I have chosen to call the case of the stranger who arrived before the crime is among these. Sufficient years have now passed, and sufficient of the principals have gone to their rest, that I feel at liberty to lay it before the public. I do so with the conviction that it stands among the most remarkable demonstrations of my friend's method that I ever had the privilege to witness. It was in the latter part of November, in the year 1889, that the matter came to us. I remember the season well, for the weather had turned bitter early that year, and a hard, dry cold had settled over London, so that the pavements rang beneath the boot and the breath of the cab horses hung in the lamplight like smoke. Holmes had been in one of his restless humors for the better part of a fortnight. He had concluded a tedious affair concerning a forged will in Hampstead, and finding nothing to occupy his singular faculties, he had fallen into that gray lethargy which I had learned to dread more than any physical illness. He would sit for hours in his dressing gown before the fire, the shag tobacco piled upon the mantelpiece within reach, playing scraps of melancholy airs upon his violin, or else lying upon the sofa with his eyes closed and his brows drawn together, saying nothing at all. "The trouble with the criminal of our age, Watson," he remarked to me one evening, breaking a silence that had lasted the better part of an hour, "is his want of imagination. He steals, he forges, he strikes his victim upon the head in a fit of passion, and he is caught within the week because he has done precisely what 1,000 dull fellows before him have done. There is no artistry in it. Give me a crime that has been thought about. Give me a wickedness with a design in it, and I should be content. You would wish evil upon the world merely to relieve your boredom," said I, perhaps more sharply than I intended. He turned his hollow eyes upon me with something almost like reproach. "I would wish nothing upon the world, my dear fellow. The evil exists whether I wish it or no. I ask only to be permitted to look at it clearly. There is a difference." And with that, he returned to his violin. I confess I was relieved when, on the following morning, the relief arrived in the form of a letter. It came by the first post, and I saw at once that it interested Holmes, for he read it through twice, then rose and carried it to the window where the thin winter light fell upon the paper. "What do you make of this, Watson?" said he, handing it to me. The letter was written upon good paper, in a firm and educated hand, though I fancied I detected in the pressure of the strokes a certain agitation held under discipline. It ran as follows: "Dear Mr. Holmes, I write to you in a state of great perplexity, and I will confess, of no little fear. My name will be unknown to you, but I am the sister of Mr. Edmund Carr-Whitley of Thornfield Grange, near the village of Little Marsden in Kent. A most extraordinary circumstance has occurred at the Grange, and though no crime has yet been committed, I am oppressed by the conviction that one is intended, and that it draws near. I cannot go to the police, for I have nothing to lay before them but my own dread and the presence of a man who has done nothing wrong. If you would consent to hear my account, I shall call upon you at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I beg that you will not dismiss me as a foolish and frightened woman until you have heard me. Yours faithfully, Miss Honoria Carr-Whitley. A crime that has not yet occurred, said Holmes, and there was a spark in his eyes that had been absent for a fortnight. You observe, Watson, that the lady does not fear for her purse or her jewels. She fears for something, and she cannot name it, and she comes to a consulting detective rather than to a physician for her nerves. That, at the least, argues a certain hard sense in her. We shall hear what she has to say. There is little enough to reason from, I remarked. On the contrary, she writes upon paper stamped with the address of the Grange, yet the letter was posted in London, from the district of Charing Cross. You observe the postmark. She has come up to town, then, and writes from a hotel or from the house of a friend, and yet she asks to call upon us tomorrow rather than today, which suggests she has business in London that occupies her, or else that she wishes to compose herself before speaking. She writes in some haste. See how the final lines crowd together, yet the hand is disciplined. A woman of education and self-command, then, but under strain. I think we shall find her worth the hearing. Miss Carr-Whitley arrived the following morning precisely, as the clock upon the mantelpiece was striking 11, and I was at once struck by the accuracy of Holmes's surmise. She was a woman of perhaps 45 years, tall and spare, dressed in dark gray with no ornament save a small brooch of jet at her throat. Her face was pale and finely made, with a high forehead and a firm mouth, and though there were shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, she carried herself with a composure that I found admirable. She was, I judged, a woman accustomed to managing a household and to being obeyed, and it was plain that whatever had driven her to us had cost her a great deal of her pride. Mr. Holmes, said she, when she was seated, I am aware that my letter must have seemed the production of an hysterical woman. I assure you I am not given to hysteria. I have managed my brother's house for the better part of 20 years, and in that time I have buried both our parents and nursed my brother through a grave illness, and I have done these things, I hope, without losing my head. I tell you this so that you will understand that, when I say I am afraid, I do not use the word lightly. I never supposed that you did, said Holmes courteously. Pray tell me what has occurred. Omit nothing, however small. The trifles are frequently of the greatest importance. She folded her gloved hands in her lap and began. My brother Edmund is 2 years my senior. We are the last of our family. Our father, the late Colonel Carr-Whitley, purchased Thornfield Grange upon his return from India some 30 years ago, and there we have lived ever since. My brother is a scholar and a recluse by temperament. He has never married. He occupies himself with his books and his collection of antique coins, in which he is something of an authority, and he troubles the world very little. We are not wealthy, but we are comfortable, and until 3 weeks ago I should have said that no household in England was more free from event or alarm. And 3 weeks ago, it prompted Holmes. 3 weeks ago, a stranger came to Little Marsden. Holmes leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, and I knew from long experience that this attitude, far from indicating inattention, meant that he was giving her his most complete and concentrated regard. He took rooms at the Green Dragon, the inn in the village, Miss Carr-Whitley continued. He gave his name as Mr. Septimus Vane, and he let it be understood that he was an antiquary, come to study the old church and the Roman remains that are found in our part of the country. There is nothing remarkable in that. We have visitors of the sort from time to time. But this man, Mr. Holmes, has not behaved like an antiquary. He has behaved like a man who is waiting. Waiting, repeated Holmes softly. I can describe it no better. He walks a great deal, always alone, and always, it seems to me, in the direction of the Grange. On 3 occasions I have observed him from my window, standing in the lane beyond our gate, looking up at the house. Not furtively, that is the strange part of it. He makes no attempt to conceal himself. He simply stands and looks, and when he has looked his fill, he turns and walks away. He has twice attempted to make my brother's acquaintance, once by letter, and once by presenting himself at the door with some question about a coin he professed to have found. My brother received him civilly enough on that occasion. They spoke for perhaps half an hour in the study. But when the man had gone, I found my brother in a state of agitation I have never seen in him before. He was white to the lips. He would not tell me what had passed between them. He said only, "It is nothing, Honoria." An old acquaintance I had hoped never to see again. He will go away in time. But he has not gone away, Mr. Holmes. And my brother has not been the same man since. In what particular has he changed? He does not sleep. I hear him walking in his room at all hours. He has taken to locking his door, which he never did before. He starts at the sound of the bell. Twice I have found him at the window after dark, watching the lane. And 3 days ago, here her composure wavered for the first time, and she pressed her handkerchief briefly to her lips before continuing. 3 days ago I found him writing what I am certain was his will. He thrust the paper into a drawer when I entered, but I saw enough. A man does not sit down to make his will in secret, in the dead of night, unless he believes his life to be in danger. Holmes had opened his eyes and was regarding her with keen attention. Has this Mr. Vane made any threat? Any demand? None that I know of. That is what makes it so terrible. He has done nothing. He has broken no law. He walks in the public lane and stops at a public inn and speaks courteously to all he meets. The village thinks him a harmless eccentric. And yet I tell you, Mr. Holmes, that man means my brother harm, and my brother knows it, and I am powerless to prevent it because there is nothing that anyone has done. Describe this Mr. Vane to me. She considered. He is a man of about 60 years, I should think, though it is difficult to say, for he has the appearance of a man who has lived hard and been much in the sun. He is spare and upright, with a weathered face and gray hair worn rather long. He carries a stick, and he walks with a slight stiffness in the left leg. His eyes are pale, a very pale gray, and there is something in them that I did not like. A kind of patience. The patience of a man who has waited a long time and does not mind waiting a little longer. You said your brother spoke of him as an old acquaintance he had hoped never to see again. Have you any notion of who he may be, or of any circumstance in your brother's past that might explain such a fear? For the first time she hesitated, and I saw the struggle in her face between her natural reticence and her desperate need of help. There is one thing, she said at last in a lower voice. It concerns my father. When my father returned from India 30 years ago, he brought with him a certain amount of money. More, I have sometimes thought, than an officer of his rank could easily have saved. It was never spoken of. But there was a matter when I was a girl, that I overheard my parents discuss late one night, thinking me abed. My father used the phrase "the business at Chandpore," and my mother wept, and my father said, "It is done, and there is an end of it, and if any man ever comes asking, he shall have nothing from me but the door." I never learned what the business at Chandpore had been. But when I saw my brother's face after this man Vane had gone from him, I remembered those words. And I have wondered whether the man who has come asking has come at last. There was a long silence in the room. The fire settled in the grate, and from the street below came the cry of a coster and the rattle of a passing dray. "Miss Carr-Whitley," said Holmes at length, "you have done entirely right in coming to me. You are correct that the police can do nothing. A man cannot be arrested for standing in a lane. But I am not the police. I am able to observe where they may only enforce. I will come down to Little Marsden. It would be best, I think, if I came in some character other than my own. As a friend of the family, perhaps, come to view your brother's collection of coins. Would that serve?" The relief that flooded her face was pitiable to see. "You will come, oh, Mr. Holmes, yes, that would serve admirably. My brother has few visitors, and a fellow enthusiast for the coins would be welcome, and Dr. Watson, Dr. Watson accompanies me as a matter of course. We shall come down tomorrow. In the meanwhile, I must ask you to do one thing, and to do it faithfully. Watch your brother, but say nothing to him of your visit to me. Whatever this danger may be, we shall accomplish nothing if he is put upon his guard against us, as he is against Mr. Vane. Can you do this?" "I can, and I will." When she had gone, Holmes sat for a long while in silence, his fingertips pressed together, gazing into the fire. "Well, Watson," he said at last, "what do you make of it?" "It seems to me a straightforward enough matter of blackmail," I ventured. "This man Vane has learned some guilty secret of the family's past, this business at Chandpore, whatever it was, and has come to extort money from the brother. The fear, the sleeplessness, the will, all point to it." "Blackmail," said Holmes, "is a reasonable first hypothesis. And yet it does not satisfy me. Consider Watson. The blackmailer's whole art lies in concealment. He works in the dark, he sends anonymous letters, he arranges secret meetings. Above all, he takes care that his victim and no one else shall know his purpose. But this man does the very opposite. He shows himself openly. He stands in the lane in broad daylight, where the whole village may see him. He calls at the house. He makes no secret of his presence, though he makes a great secret of his intention. That is not the conduct of a blackmailer, Watson. A blackmailer wishes his victim to pay and be quiet. This man wishes his victim to be afraid. He is not extracting something. He is announcing something. Announcing what? That, my dear fellow, is precisely what we must go to Kent to discover. But I will tell you this. A man who wishes his enemy to know, day after day, that he is coming, and who is content to wait while that knowledge does its slow work upon the nerves, such a man is not after money. He is after a reckoning. And there is nothing in this world so patient or so dangerous as a man who has come for a reckoning and is in no hurry at all. We traveled down to Kent the following afternoon. It was a gray and lowering day, the cold having given way to a heavy sky that promised snow. And as our train drew out of Charing Cross and rattled southward through the smoke-blackened suburbs, Holmes was silent, wrapped in his gray traveling cloak with his ear-flapped cap drawn down, apparently asleep. But I knew that behind those closed lids, the machine of his mind was turning ceaselessly over the few facts we possessed. Little Marsden proved to be a small and ancient village lying in a fold of the Weald, some 4 miles from the railway station at Marsden Cross. We engaged a fly at the station, and were driven through a landscape that grew steadily bleaker as the afternoon wore towards its early close. The hop garden stood stripped and skeletal, the poles stacked in wigwams against the leaden sky. The hedges were bare, and here and there a great oak, black and dripping, stood solitary in the sodden fields. As we came into the village itself, the first flakes of snow began to fall, drifting down slow and heavy through the still air. Thornfield Grange lay a half-mile beyond the village, a square, solid house of gray stone dating, I judged from the reign of Queen Anne, standing back from the lane behind a screen of leafless limes. It had a shut and secretive look, with its blinds half drawn and only a single window lit against the gathering dusk. Miss Carwhitley received us in the hall, and I observed that her anxiety had, if anything, deepened since our interview in Baker Street. "He is worse," she whispered to us as she took our coats. "Last night I heard him weeping. My brother, Mr. Holmes, a man of 60, weeping like a child in the dark. And this morning he asked me whether I thought a man might be forgiven a thing done 30 years ago. I did not know what to answer him. You have said nothing of us." Nothing. I have told him only that a Mr. Holmes and a Dr. Watson, gentlemen of my acquaintance from London, are come to see the collection. He was displeased at first, but I think in truth he is glad of the company. He dreads to be alone. Edmund Carwhitley received us in his study, and I own that his appearance shocked me. He was a tall man, as tall as his sister, but stooped, and so thin that his clothes hung upon him as upon a frame. His face was that of a scholar, broad-browed, sensitive, with a fine-cut nose and a mouth that must once have been firm, but was now loose and tremulous. His hands, as he offered them to us, shook perceptibly, and his eyes had the hunted, sleepless look of a man pursued. Yet he made an effort at courtesy that was almost painful to witness, and when the talk turned to his coins, he warmed a little, and something of the scholar's enthusiasm crept back into his manner. The collection was indeed a fine one. He kept it in a series of shallow drawers within a great mahogany cabinet, and he drew them out one by one, discoursing upon the coins with a knowledge that even I, who am no antiquary, could perceive to be considerable. Holmes proved an admirable listener, asking questions of exactly the sort to draw the old man out, and admiring the pieces with a warmth that I knew to be assumed, but which was entirely convincing. Yet all the while I saw that my friend's eyes were moving ceaselessly about the room, over the crowded bookshelves, the heavy curtains, the great desk with its litter of papers, the single narrow window that looked out upon the darkening lane. "You have a remarkable series of the Bactrian kings," Holmes observed, bending over a drawer. I had not thought to see so fine a Eucratides outside a public collection. "You acquired these in India, perhaps?" I saw the old man's hand jerk, and a coin fell from his fingers to the baize with a small, dull sound. My father acquired some of them," he said. "He was many years in India. I have added to the collection since." "India," said Holmes pleasantly, replacing the fallen coin with care. "A wonderful country for the collector. I have a correspondent at Delhi who tells me the most extraordinary things. There is a great deal buried in that soil, Mr. Carr Whitley. A great deal that comes to the surface, sooner or later, in the most unexpected ways. It was cruelly done, and I confess I did not at the time understand why Holmes chose to probe the old man's wound so directly. But I saw the effect of it. Carr Whitley had gone gray, and he closed the drawer with a hand that trembled so that the coins rattled within. "You must forgive me, gentlemen," he said. "I am not well. I have not been well for some weeks. My sister will give you tea. I must rest a little." When he had left us, Holmes turned at once to his sister. "Miss Carr Whitley, I must ask you a question that may seem impertinent, but which is of the first importance. Has your brother, at any time in the past 3 weeks, received any communication from Mr. Vane in writing? A note, a letter, anything?" There was the one letter, at the first, before Mr. Vane called. "My brother burned it." "You are certain it was burned?" "I saw the ashes in this grate. And there was one thing more, Mr. Holmes, which I had forgotten until this moment. On the morning after Mr. Vane's visit, the visit that so distressed my brother, a small packet was delivered by hand. I did not see the contents, but my brother took it into this room, and when he came out he was as a man who has seen a ghost. He has never spoken of it. Do you know what became of the packet?" "I do not." Holmes crossed to the great desk and stood looking down at it, though he touched nothing. "Miss Carr Whitley, with your permission, I should like to remain here alone for a few minutes. I shall touch nothing that ought not to be touched. Watson, be so good as to keep the lady company. And Miss Carr Whitley, if your brother should return, engage him in conversation and give me warning." We left him there, and I sat with the lady in the drawing-room for perhaps a quarter of an hour, during which I attempted such consolation as I could offer, though in truth I had little enough to give. When Holmes rejoined us, his face wore that expression of contained energy which I had learned to associate with a case that was beginning to yield to him. "I think," he said quietly, "that Dr. Watson and I shall walk down to the Green Dragon and take a room there for the night. No, Miss Carr Whitley, do not be alarmed. I have no intention of leaving you unprotected. But I wish to observe Mr. Vane at close quarters, and I can do that best from within the same house. I shall return to the Grange first thing tomorrow. In the meanwhile, I beg that you will see that every door and window is secured tonight, and that you will not, on any account, permit your brother to leave the house after dark, nor admit any visitor whatsoever. Can I rely upon you?" "Oh, you can. Then we shall bid you good evening." The snow was falling steadily as we walked back to the village, and the lamps of the Green Dragon were a welcome sight through the whirling flakes. It was an old timbered inn, low-ceilinged and warm, with a great fire roaring in the taproom, and we were received by the landlord, a stout and garrulous fellow named Perkins, who seemed glad of custom on so wild a night. Holmes engaged rooms, and having warmed ourselves, we settled into a corner of the taproom, where Holmes lost no time in turning the conversation, by easy stages, to the other guest beneath the landlord's roof. "A quiet gentleman, Mr. Vane," said Perkins, wiping a glass. "Keeps himself to himself, mostly. Out all day, walking, whatever the weather. An antiquary, so he says, though I've never seen him with so much as a trowel. Pays regular, gives no trouble. But I'll tell you what, gentlemen, since you ask, there's something about him I can't rightly fathom. He'll sit where you're sitting now of an evening, and never say a word, only look into that fire. And once, it was the second night he was here, I came in sudden with the coals, and he was talking to himself. Low like. And what he said was 30 years. 30 years, and now the door opens. Gave me a turn, I don't mind telling you. A melancholy man, observed Holmes. That's the word for him, sir. Melancholy. As if he was carrying something heavy that he couldn't put down. We had not long to wait to see the man himself. At about 8 o'clock the door of the tap-room opened, admitting a swirl of cold air and a scattering of snow, and Mr. Septimus Vane came in. Miss Carr-Whitley's description had been exact. He was a spare, upright figure of about 60, with a weathered, deep-lined face and long gray hair, and he moved with that slight stiffness of the left leg which she had noted. But it was his eyes that arrested me, pale gray and very steady, with an expression in them that I can only describe as one of profound and settled sorrow, held rigidly under control. He gave us a grave inclination of the head as he passed, and seated himself at a small table near the fire, where the landlord brought him bread and cold meat, and a glass of ale, which he consumed slowly and with an air of deep abstraction. Holmes, to my surprise, addressed him directly. "A hard night for the traveler, sir," he said pleasantly. "We are strangers here ourselves, come down from London on a small matter of business. Holmes is my name. This is my friend Dr. Watson." The pale gray eyes turned upon us, and I had the uncomfortable sensation of being very thoroughly examined. "Vane," said the stranger after a pause. "Septimus Vane. You are welcome to the county, gentlemen, such welcome as it offers at this season." His voice was low and cultivated, with an odd, deliberate quality, as of a man who weighed each word. "Business, you say? I trust it is happier business than my own. And what is your business, if I may ask?" I said Holmes. "I am settling an old account," said Mr. Vane. He said it very quietly, looking into the fire, and there was that in his tone which forbade any lighter response. Then he seemed to recollect himself, and added, "Antiquarian matters. There are Roman remains hereabouts of some interest. I study the past, Mr. Holmes. I find that the past repays study. It does not go away, you know, however much we might wish it to. It waits." "You speak," said Holmes, "as a man who has known the past to return." For a long moment the stranger did not answer. He turned his glass slowly in his weathered fingers, and the firelight moved in the pale liquid. "I have known men," he said at last, "who did a great wrong long ago and who prospered by it, and who came to believe as the years passed and no reckoning came that there would be no reckoning at all. That the dead were dead and the buried were buried, and that a man might build a comfortable life upon the bones of the thing he had done, and grow old and be respected, and die in his bed. I have known such men, sir, and I have made it my business to teach them that they were mistaken." He rose, gathering his stick. "Forgive me. I am poor company tonight. I wish you a good evening, gentlemen, and a safe return to London when your business is done. This is no comfortable country for strangers." And with a grave bow he withdrew, and we heard his uneven step upon the stair. Holmes sat gazing at the fire for a long while after he had gone. "A most singular man, Watson," he said at last. Did you observe his hands? They were much marked and calloused. The hands of a laboring man, I thought, though his speech is that of a gentleman. The hands of a man who has done hard manual work for many years, in a hot climate. Observe the deep tanning that has not faded even in an English winter, and the particular scarring across the palms. And did you observe his coat? The plain dark coat. Nothing remarkable. The cut of it, Watson, is fully 20 years out of the London fashion, and the cloth is of a weight and weave that is made not for England but for the tropics. It is far too thin for this climate, which is why he suffers so from the cold. You saw how he drew near the fire. This is a man who has spent very many years abroad, in a hot country, doing hard physical labor, and who has but recently returned to England with clothes bought long ago and worn hard. And his name is not Septimus Vane. How can you possibly know that? Because when I addressed him by name across the room a moment before he left, I said, "Then we are agreed, Mr." Vane he did not turn. A man answers to his own name by instinct, Watson, even across a crowded room, even half asleep. It is the most deeply rooted of all our reflexes. A man does not answer to a name that is not his own unless he is thinking of it, unless he is attending. Vane is a name he has taken up recently and must consciously remember to wear. No, our melancholy antiquary is traveling under a false name, has spent decades abroad at hard labor in a hot climate, walks with the stiffness of an old injury to the leg, and has come to England to settle, as he says, an old account of 30 years standing. I think, Watson, that we begin to see the shape of the thing. You think he means to murder Carr Whitley? I think, said Holmes slowly, that everything he has done is designed to make Carr Whitley believe exactly that. And that, my dear Watson, is a very different matter. Let us sleep. Tomorrow I must send some telegrams, and I fancy the answers will tell us a great deal. I slept ill that night, my rest broken by the wind that moaned about the old inn and by a sense of oppression that I could not shake off. Once waking in the small hours, I heard a step in the passage, the slow, uneven step of the man in the next room, pacing back and forth, until at last it ceased and the house fell silent again beneath the falling snow. In the morning Holmes was gone before I woke, and I found him at the little post office in the village, from which he had dispatched no fewer than 4 telegrams, to whom he would not say. We must wait for our answers, Watson, was all he would tell me. In the meanwhile, let us pay our respects at the Grange, and let us contrive, if we can, to learn from Mr. Edmund Carr Whitley the thing that he is so very determined not to tell. We found the household in a state of some disorder. Miss Carr Whitley met us with the news that her brother had passed a dreadful night, and had that morning shut himself in his study and refused all food. He will see no one, she said. He has said that he wishes only to be let alone. Mr. Holmes, I am at my wit's end. I cannot go on like this. You shall not have to for very much longer, said Holmes gently. Miss Carr Whitley, I must speak with your brother, and I must speak with him alone. I know that he has refused to see anyone. But I believe that if you will carry him a message from me, he will consent. Tell him this, exactly as I say it. Tell him that a man is come from London who knows what befell at Chandpore in the year 1857, and who counsels him, for his own sake and for the sake of the living, to unburden himself while there is yet time. Will you do that? She went white-faced, and returned within a few minutes to say that her brother would see us. We found Edmund Carr-Whitley seated at his desk, and he had aged, it seemed to me, 10 years in a single night. He did not rise. He looked at Holmes with the dull, exhausted eyes of a man who has come to the end of his resistance. "So," he said, "you are not, I think, a collector of coins. My name is Sherlock Holmes. Your sister came to me in her fear for you. I have not come to accuse you, Mr. Carr-Whitley, nor to threaten you. I have come to help you if you will let me. But I can do nothing unless I know the truth. What happened at Chandpore?" The old man was silent for a long moment. Then, as if a dam had given way within him, he began to speak, and it all came out of him in a low, halting, unstoppable flood, the confession of 30 years' secret guilt. "It was during the mutiny," he said, "of the year 57. My father was an officer, as you know, with a small detachment near Chandpore in the north. I was a young man then, not 22, serving as his aide. Those were terrible days, Mr. Holmes. You who were not there cannot conceive of it. The whole country in flames, the reports of massacres coming in daily, men we had known murdered with their wives and children, no man knowing whom he could trust. We were half mad with fear and hatred, all of us. There was a native banker in the district, a man of great wealth named Danple Rao. He was, I believe now, entirely loyal to us. He had always been our friend, had lent money to the garrison, had sheltered English families in the first days of the Rising. But there came a rumor, I do not know to this day whether there was a word of truth in it, that he was in secret communication with the rebels, that he had betrayed a party of our people to their deaths. My father believed it, or chose to believe it. And there was Mr. Holmes, God forgive us, there was the matter of his treasure. He was said to keep a great fortune in his house. My father sent a party to arrest him. I was of that party. There was resistance, or what we took for resistance. Shots were fired. When it was over, Danple Rao lay dead upon the floor of his own house, and his son with him, a boy of perhaps 18, and the house was ours. We took the treasure. We told ourselves it was lawful plunder, the spoils of a traitor taken in rebellion. My father brought the greater part of it home to England. He had bought this house. It has kept us, my sister and me, all our lives. But it was not lawful, Mr. Holmes. It was murder and robbery, done to an innocent man and his innocent son, in a moment of blind terror and greed. I have known it for 30 years. I have never had one peaceful night. And now the reckoning has come. That man, Vane, he is no antiquary. I do not know his true name, but I know his face. He has the eyes of Danple Rao. I saw it the moment he stood in this room. And he has sent me, the old man's voice broke, he has sent me a token. To show that he knows all. He drew from the drawer of his desk a small object wrapped in silk, and unwrapped it with shaking hands. It was a coin, an ancient gold coin of curious design, worn smooth with much handling. This was Danple Rao's, he whispered. He carried it always for luck. It was upon his body when he died. I took it. I have kept it 30 years as a penance perhaps, or a torment. It has never left this house. It has never left this drawer. And 3 weeks ago, the morning after that man came here, a packet was left at my door. Inside it was this coin's fellow, the very twin of it that Danple Rao's son carried. I did not know such a twin existed. But there can be no doubt. Only the family could have possessed it. He has sent it to me to say, I know what you did. I know you took my father's coin from his dead hand. And now I have come. Holmes had listened to this dreadful narrative with his head bowed and his eyes half closed. Now he raised his head, and there was a curious expression upon his keen face, not the triumph I had expected, but something graver and more thoughtful. Mr. Carr-Whitley, he said, I must ask to see the coin that was sent to you, the twin. The old man produced a second coin, wrapped likewise in silk, and Holmes carried it to the window and examined it long and minutely through his lens, turning it this way and that in the gray light. When at last he lowered the glass, he stood for a while very still. Mr. Carr-Whitley, he said, I must ask you to trust me and to do nothing whatever, until I give you leave. Do not attempt to see Mr. Vane. Do not attempt to leave this house. Above all, do not do the thing which I perceive you have been contemplating. He glanced, as he spoke, at a small drawer in the desk, which stood a little ajar, and I saw, following his eyes, the dull gleam of metal within, the barrel of an old service revolver. That would be the worst of all courses, both for yourself and for the memory of the man you wronged. Give me until this evening. I believe I shall then be able to bring this long matter to an end, and perhaps to a better end than you dare to hope. We left the stricken old man and walked out into the snow, and Holmes was silent and abstracted for a long time as we made our way back towards the village. You have solved it, then, I said at last. Vane is the grandson of this murdered banker, come to take his revenge. Have I solved it? Said Holmes. I wonder, Watson. There are 2 or 3 small things that trouble me. That coin, for one. He paused in the snowy lane. Consider the story we have been told. Dample Rao carried a lucky coin, which was taken from his dead body by young Carr-Whitley, and has lain hidden in a locked drawer for 30 years, seen by no one. Now his descendant sends the twin of that coin as a token to say, I know you have my father's coin. But Watson, how could the avenger possibly know that Carr-Whitley possessed the coin at all? It was taken secretly, in the confusion of a killing 30 years ago. It has never been seen. Carr-Whitley himself told us it never left the drawer. The one fact upon which the whole threat depends, that Carr-Whitley holds the dead man's lucky coin, is the one fact that no outsider, however vengeful, could possibly know. And yet the token is precisely calculated to work upon exactly that guilty knowledge. It is as though the sender knew not merely what Carr-Whitley did, but what Carr-Whitley kept and where, and what it meant to him. I confess this had not occurred to me. Then how do you explain it? I do not yet explain it. I observe it. And I observe one thing more. Look here. He drew out his notebook, in which he had made a careful sketch of the second coin. The coin sent to Carr-Whitley is not, as he supposes, an identical twin of the first. It is a coin of the same type, a cushion gold piece of the 2nd century, but it is a different specimen in markedly better condition, and, unless I am much mistaken, it was cleaned and mounted for a collector's cabinet within the last 20 years. It bears the faint traces of a jeweler's mount at the edge, and a residue of the particular preparation that dealers use to bring up the luster of old gold. This is not a family heirloom carried next a man's heart across 30 years of exile. This is a coin bought in a shop. And that, Watson, changes everything. I do not follow you. Then let us wait for my telegrams. I think they are due about now, and I fancy they will complete the picture. He quickened his pace towards the post office, and I hurried to keep up with him through the deepening snow. 3 of the 4 telegrams had arrived, and Holmes read them where he stood, his face growing keener with each. He passed them to me without a word. The first was from a name I did not know in Delhi, and read, "Family of Danpal Rao banker Chandpore extinct. Both sons killed 1857. No known descendants. Estate escheated. Furrows." The second, from a dealer in coins and antiquities in London, read, "Cushion gold as described sold from our stock April last to gentleman giving name Mortimer. Paid cash. Can supply description if required. Ospink agent." The third was from Scotland Yard, and it was this that made Holmes's eyes glitter. "Party you name known to us. Real name Rufus Mordaunt. Solicitor's clerk, struck off and imprisoned 1871 for fraud and forgery. Released 1878. He went abroad. Believed returned England this year. Not the man he claims. A Lestrade." "So," said Holmes softly, folding the telegrams, "there are no descendants of Danpal Rao. Our avenger avenges a family that has no one left to avenge it. The coin is no heirloom, but a specimen bought last April in a London shop by a gentleman giving name Mortimer. And the melancholy stranger with the tropical clothes and the false name is not the grandson of a murdered Indian banker, but one Rufus Mordaunt, an English forger and confidence man, lately returned from wherever the law's memory does not reach. Watson, we have been watching a play. A most artful and most cruel play, staged by a professional deceiver for an audience of one guilty and terrified old man. The question that remains, and it is the whole question, is this: what does the player hope to gain by it? For it is not money. I have never yet known Mordaunt's sort to spend 3 weeks freezing in a country inn, playing the tragic penitent, when there is money to be had by simpler means. There is something here I do not yet grasp. And the 4th telegram, which has not come, may hold the key. The 4th telegram came that afternoon, and when Holmes read it, he was silent for a long moment, and then he said very quietly, "Ah, now I understand it all. And we have, I fear, no time to lose." He would not show me the telegram, but thrust it into his pocket and rose at once. "Watson, your revolver, have you it about you? Good. We must return to the Grange, and we must be there before dark. This is the 3rd night, Watson, and I am very much afraid that on the 3rd night the play was to reach its climax. We have perhaps overturned the villain's plan by our presence, but a clever villain has more than one plan, and a desperate one will improvise. The short winter afternoon was already fading as we hastened back through the snow, which now lay thick upon the fields and muffled our footfalls. The sky had cleared, and a bitter frost was setting in, and the first stars were pricking out cold and hard above the black line of the woods. As we came within sight of the Grange, Holmes checked suddenly and drew me into the shadow of the hedge. "Look," he whispered. A figure was moving in the lane before the house, the tall, spare, upright figure of the man who called himself Vane. But he was not standing and gazing now. He was moving with purpose towards the gate, and as we watched, he passed through it and up the drive, and we saw him go, not to the front door, but around the side of the house, towards the study window in which a single lamp burned. "Quickly and quietly," breathed Holmes. We followed, keeping to the shadows, our feet silent in the snow. Rounding the corner of the house, we came within view of the lighted study window, and what we saw there brought us both to a halt. The window stood open. Within, at his desk, sat Edmund Carr-Whitley, rigid, his face a mask of terror, and in his hand, leveled and shaking, was the old service revolver. And outside the window, 1 foot already upon the sill, stood the man Mordaunt, his pale face lit from below by the lamp, his hands spread wide and empty before him, speaking in that low, deliberate voice. "No farther than this, unless you bid me," he was saying. "I am unarmed, as you see. I have not come to harm you, Carr-Whitley. I have come only that we two, who alone in all the world know of that far-off night, may at last speak of it together. Put down the pistol. Let me in. Let us make an end." And I saw with a cold horror what was intended. The old man's nerve was breaking. In another moment he would fire upon an unarmed man standing at his window, pleading for admittance, and the whole world would know only that Edmund Carr-Whitley had shot down a harmless stranger in cold blood. I understood at last the shape of the trap. It was not the stranger who was to die. "Now, Watson," cried Holmes and sprang forward. What followed passed in a few seconds. At Holmes's shout, Mordaunt whirled about and, seeing us, leapt back from the window. The old man, startled, discharged the pistol wildly, the ball going high and shattering the glass of a bookcase within. And Mordaunt turned and ran, with a speed astonishing in a man of his years and his supposed lameness, across the snow towards the shrubbery. But I was ready for him. I flung myself in his path, and though he struggled with a wiry and desperate strength, Holmes was upon him in an instant, and between us we bore him to the ground and held him there, panting in the trampled snow, while from the house came the cries of Miss Carr-Whitley and the servants, roused by the shot. We carried our prisoner into the study. The lameness, I now perceived, was wholly feigned. He walked between us upright and steady. And when we had him in the lamplight, with the door shut and the frightened old man staring at him from behind his desk, Holmes addressed him in a voice of cold contempt. "The game is played out, Mr. Rufus Mordaunt," he said. "Yes, I know your name and your history, and I know that there is no drop of Indian blood in your veins, and no murdered grandsire crying to you from the dust of Chandpore. You are a forger and a swindler, lately of the colonies, and this whole elaborate tragedy of the returning avenger has been from first to last a fraud, contrived to work upon a sick old man's conscience until his reason gave way. What I do not yet perfectly understand is the end of it, though I begin to see that too. Perhaps you will tell us, or perhaps I must tell you." The man Mordaunt had recovered his composure with remarkable swiftness. He straightened his coat and looked from Holmes to the old man behind the desk, and a slow, bitter smile crossed his weathered features. "You are a clever man, Mr. Holmes, cleverer than I had reckoned when I marked you for a meddling coin fancier. Very well. Since it is finished, you shall have the truth, and small joy may it bring you." He turned his pale eyes upon Edmund Carr-Whitley. "Shall I tell them, Edmund? Or will you?" The old man made no sound. He had sunk into his chair, and he was staring at Mordaunt as a bird stares at a snake. "He does not know me," said Mordaunt. "That is the jest of it. He has never known me. But I have known him these 30 years, from a distance, known him and watched him and hated him as I hated his father before him. My name, Mr. Holmes, since the police have given it you, is indeed Mordaunt. But I had another name once, long ago, when I was a boy of 10 years old in the town of Chandpore. My father was not a great banker. My father was John Ashe, a sergeant of the detachment that Colonel Carr Whitley commanded, and he was a decent man, my father, an honest man in a dishonest company. He was of the party that went to Danple Rowe's house that night, and he saw what was done there. He saw the old banker and his son shot down in cold blood, and the treasure taken, and he knew it for the murder and robbery it was. And because he was honest and would not hold his tongue, and threatened to lay the whole matter before the general, do you know what became of my father, Mr. Holmes? His voice had risen, and there was in it now a passion that no art could have counterfeited. He died. Of fever, they said, a week after Chandpore. But my mother knew, and I knew, that it was no fever. He was made away with quietly, as such things were managed in those days, by men who could not afford to let him speak. Colonel Carr Whitley wrote my mother a letter of condolence, and enclosed £10, and thought the account was closed. We came home to England, my mother and I, to poverty and shame, while the Carr Whitleys built their fine house upon their stolen gold. My mother died in a workhouse infirmary, Mr. Holmes. And I have spent my life, as you have heard, in fraud, in prison, in exile. That was the inheritance the Carr Whitleys left me. So do not speak to me of forgers and swindlers, Mr. Holmes, until you know what makes them. There was a silence in the room. The old man behind the desk had begun to weep, soundlessly, the tears running down his ravaged face. "And so," said Holmes at length, and his voice had lost something of its hardness, "you came for your reckoning." "I came for justice," said Mordaunt, "since the law would give me none. I could not prove the murder. The witnesses were dead these 30 years, my father among them. I could lay nothing before a court. But I knew the son. I knew that Edmund Carr Whitley had been of that party, a boy of 20, and I judged, rightly, as you see, that his conscience had never let him rest. So I studied him. I learned what I could of the affair. I could not know the small particulars. I did not know of the lucky coin he had kept. That was my own invention, a coin bought in a London shop, sent as a token, that his guilt might supply from its own store the meaning I could not. And it did. His guilt did all my work for me. I had only to appear, and to be patient, and to let his own conscience raise up before him the avenger he most dreaded. You meant, said Holmes, that he should destroy himself. Either that his reason should give way, and he should be put quietly out of the world into an asylum, and the fortune pass to the one person you had already made your instrument. Or, failing that in the extremity of his terror he should do murder upon you before witnesses, save that the murder was to be no murder, for you meant to be too quick for him. You would appear at his window, unarmed and pleading, and he would fire, and then you would fall back into the dark and be gone, and there would be nothing left but a broken old man who had shot down a harmless stranger, to be hanged or shut away for life. And either way, the estate of Thornfield Grange, the estate built on your father's blood, would come at last into the hands of the person you had spent these months winning to your purpose. I stared at Holmes in bewilderment. But into whose hands, Holmes? Who is this instrument you speak of? For answer, Holmes drew from his pocket the 4th telegram, the one he had not shown me, and laid it upon the desk. And even as he did so, the door of the study opened, and Miss Honoria Carr-Whitley came into the room. She stopped upon the threshold. Her eyes went to the man Mordaunt held between us, to her weeping brother, to the telegram upon the desk. And I saw, in that moment, the composure that I had so admired drop from her face like a mask, and beneath it something I had not suspected, a look of such cold and desperate calculation as I have seldom seen upon a human countenance. "I think, Miss Carr-Whitley," said Holmes quietly, "that you had better close the door." The telegram upon the desk, which I read a moment later, was from a bank in Tunbridge Wells, and it stated that over the preceding 6 months Miss Honoria Carr-Whitley had, upon 3 occasions, drawn upon her own small private account sums amounting in total to some £200, in cash, sums that had, Holmes had ascertained, found their way into the possession of the man calling himself Vane. "You paid him," said Holmes. "You, who came to me in Baker Street with a face of such honest fear. You paid this man, and you set the whole tragedy in motion, and you engaged me. That was your masterstroke, Miss Carr-Whitley, and it very nearly deceived me utterly. You engaged the one man in England most likely to unravel the plot, precisely because you knew that a genuinely innocent and frightened sister would do exactly that, and because you calculated that I should arrive, observe your brother's terror and the sinister stranger, and become, all unknowing, the most respectable. You did not foresee that I should look, not at the stranger, but at you." She had gone very white, but she did not flinch, and when she spoke her voice was steady. "You understand nothing," she said. "You come here with your telegrams and your clever talk, and you understand nothing at all. Do you know what my life has been, Mr. Holmes? 20 years I have kept this house. 20 years I have nursed that weeping wreck of a man, and buried our parents, and watched every year of my youth pass by within these walls, and for what? For a house I may not own and money I may not touch, all left in my brother's hands, to pass, at his death, to a cousin in Canada whom neither of us has ever seen, because my father did not think a woman fit to be trusted with his precious tainted gold. I have given my whole life to this family, and this family has given me nothing but service and silence. When that man came to me, when he told me who he was and what our family had done and how we might," she stopped. "How you might be rid of your brother," said Holmes, "and lay hands at last upon the inheritance you felt was owed you. Yes. He found in you a most apt confederate. He supplied the plan and played the avenger. You supplied the money, the knowledge of the household, and the perfect innocence of the grieving sister. It was a most ingenious partnership. It failed for one reason only, Miss Carr-Whitley, because you were both too clever. Real vengeance is a simple thing, and real fear is a simple thing, and this affair was not simple at all. It was constructed, and whatever is constructed can be taken apart. It remains only to set down the end of the matter, which I shall do briefly, for it is not a tale in which any man can take much pleasure. Rufus Mordaunt was taken up that night, and in the following spring he stood his trial, not for the murder that had been so narrowly prevented, but upon the old charges of fraud that Lestrade had unearthed, together with the demonstrable conspiracy against Edmund Carr-Whitley. The graver design, the attempt to procure a man's destruction by working upon his mind, was a thing the law of that day was ill fitted to punish, there being no overt act to which a name could easily be put. But enough was proved to send him to a long term of penal servitude, from which, I believe, he did not emerge alive. To the end he maintained that he had sought only justice for his murdered father, and I confess that, villain though he was, I could never wholly harden my heart against him, for there was truth in his grievance, whatever the wickedness of his remedy. As for Miss Honoria Carr-Whitley, no charge was ever brought against her. Holmes, after long reflection, judged that the evidence against her, the payments, the engaging of his own services, would not suffice to convict her of any crime known to the law, since she had struck no blow and could plead that the money was a private matter and her summons to Baker Street the act of a frightened woman. "The law cannot punish a state of mind, Watson," he said to me, "and it is as well that it cannot, or we should all of us stand in some danger. She is punished sufficiently. She must live out her life beneath the roof of the brother she sought to destroy, and he must live beneath the same roof knowing what she is. There is no jail so close as that." And so indeed it proved. Edmund Carr-Whitley, freed from the phantom that had haunted him, seemed for a time to gather a little strength. He set his affairs in order, and, at Holmes's private urging, made such restitution as 30 years too late could be made, endowing a hospital in the district of Chandpore in the name of Danple Rao and of Sergeant John Ashe alike. But his health was broken past mending, and he did not live above 2 years more. The house passed, as his father had ordained, to the unknown cousin in Canada, and Miss Carr-Whitley, I have heard, went to live in reduced circumstances in a seaside town alone. I have sometimes wondered what her thoughts were in the long evenings of her solitude, but it is not a thing upon which I care to dwell. "It is a melancholy business, Watson," said Holmes to me, as our train bore us back to London through a landscape white and silent under the moon. "The most melancholy of all, I sometimes think, not the crime of hot blood which any man may fall into, but the slow, patient, calculated wickedness that dresses itself in the garments of grief. Observe how nearly it succeeded. Had they been content to work more crudely, I should never have been called. Had they not called me, I should never have looked beneath the surface. It was their very artistry that undid them. The stranger arrived before the crime, Watson, so that all eyes should be fixed upon the crime that was to come, and no one thought to ask why the stranger came at all, or who it was that had opened the door to let him in. He was silent a while, watching the moonlit fields go by. "There is a lesson in it," he said at last, "though I hardly know how to phrase it. Perhaps it is only this, that the most dangerous falsehoods are not those which are wholly false. Mordaunt's grief was real. His father was indeed murdered. The Carr-Whitleys' fortune was indeed built on blood. Every stone in that edifice of deception was a true stone. It was only the building itself that was a lie. And that, Watson, is why I trust nothing so little as a story in which every part is true and the whole is impossible. Guilt, you see, is the most obliging of accomplices. Show a guilty man the shape of his fear, and he will paint in all the rest himself. The lamps of London were rising before us in the frosty dark, and Holmes said no more, but I have never forgotten his words, nor the strange and sorrowful affair that gave them rise, and which I have here set down at last, that others may see how near a clever malice may come to wearing the very face of justice, and how it was undone by nothing more than a man who declined to look where he was bidden, and looked instead where he was not.